Pam, pam, pam. Nah, don't put that. Pam, pam, pam. Let's do it more professionally this time. Ladies and gentlemen, sit down with your THC and get ready for some THD. This is Two Hits Down in session.
So I was working on this video the other day on DB Cooper. You heard of the guy?
No.
So this was, I think, in the 70s or the 80s, America. And this guy books a flight from Portland to Seattle, right? And now at that point of time, airport security wasn't that strict. Like it was pre 9/11, dude. Like so, airport security wasn't very strict with whatever they were. So this guy goes, he books a flight in cash, and he's a well dressed guy, right? He's wearing a suit, he's wearing sunglasses, and he has like this brown bag with him, like a briefcase. And so he goes, he gets on the flight, he orders a bourbon and a 7 Up. He has his drink, and then he calls the air hostess, and he hands her a little note, which basically says, I have a bomb. And right below that, he had written that he wanted 200,000 American dollars and 4 parachutes. Very specific, 4 parachutes. So naturally, this air hostess must have freaked out. She told the pilot and stuff, but technically, he had like hijacked the plane.
In a very subtle way.
Very subtle way, very classy. Got to hand it to the guy. So then the plane lands in Seattle, and he lets all the passengers go. Right. He lets all the passengers go, but the pilot and basically the entire crew is still on the plane. And he negotiates with the U.S. government for some time, and they finally decide to give in. So they give him his $200,000 and 4 parachutes, and then he instructs the pilots to fly to Mexico. Okay. He instructs the pilots to fly to Mexico. The plane takes off once again with him and the money and the parachutes. And I think this was in the middle of the night, and he opens the door while the plane was midair. He opens the door, takes the money, and jumps out with the parachutes. Nobody ever heard from the guy again. So he literally stole $200,000 from the American government and disappeared. And they tried searching for him. They found like traces of the money and stuff, but no one could really find who DB Cooper.
Oh, of course. I mean, if they found traces of the money and not him, so I'm sure DB Cooper wasn't alive right after he jumped from the plane. I mean, you got to think about the logic in this as well. Like, no doubt he pulled it off really classy, really well, but there's also, like, I see a few loopholes in the story. One, no, one thing that was smart in the story is that he let the passengers go first hand, so just in case when he jumped from the plane, if something were to happen to the plane, he let the passengers go. But of course, there were still lives at risk, which were the crew.
Okay, so I don't think he had a bomb in the first place. I think that was all fake, right? He just wanted the money. And yeah, I mean, I get your point of view, but they didn't find a body either. Now it's much more easier to find a dead body which is lying in one place as compared to a guy with $200,000 running around.
But but you got to take into consideration that in today's day and age, it would be easy. In the 80s, people were finding bodies after 40 years, after 30 years, like that. So many serial killers had to actually disclose where they had hidden the bodies, and then people realize, oh, this guy's killed like 30 people, like 50 people.
Yeah, but that's like ancient stuff. And I mean, they did quite an extensive search. So, I mean, this was all over the news and they did quite an extensive search. And they didn't find anything. And even now, 40 years later, I mean, crews still go out and try to see if they can find any evidence to figure out who the guy was, if he is still alive or whatever it is. They couldn't really find much. And then there are quite a few conspiracy theories that also turned up around DB Cooper. So they did, interrogate a few people and all who kind of matched the specs. So in order to pull off something like that, you need to have some experience. So they were looking at, some guys who were like ex-military, who had a criminal record and stuff like that. They did do quite an extensive search. But you know what part of the story I like the best? He became a legend, dude.
Yeah, no doubt. Pulled out one of the coolest things in history. hijacked a plane, stole money, and vanished.
So the whole narrative was that he basically, stole money from like the government, like the rich, and then just
Yeah, because
disappeared. Like,
these are three things that people do in different. Like if you see, there's a group of people that have hijacked a plane, deemed terrorists. There's a group of people that have stolen banks, money from banks, deemed thieves. And then he just vanished out of thin air. Those are people who have disappeared or made themselves disappear. So in doesn't that bring up the question that was he working for a certain government? Was he working for the government?
I don't think so. I mean, like, I don't think that will be legit. But he became quite a like a legend in that town where he disappeared, because so now they have like pubs and bars named after him, and they have a DB Cooper beer.
Yeah, history is full of stories like this. Oh, the crazy story is about the WWE wrestler uh, Chris Benoit. Have you ever heard about him?
Who is he?
Okay, so let me break it down. When I was growing up, besides The Rock, which came a little later on, and the Hulk was Hulk Hogan, who was a bit early. In the middle, between the early 90s, there was this one wrestler, Chris Benoit. Dude, every wrestler at that time wanted to be Chris Benoit. Like, if you see the documentaries about him, any wrestler, like even Triple H, one of his very close friends, he himself said that, the fame that he achieved and the personality that he was, like people loved him. He was a people's champion. So in WWE, that happened very less. A guy who came and became a people's champion. So his story goes as such. He reached the highest level that a champion, WWE champion, could reach at that time. WWE or WWF, I think. I'm not sure, but it was one of those periods. So during that time, he was set up for another big match, and like the hype that they created at that time, they used to sell out stadiums at least 40-50,000 ka crowd. So to have that kind of viewership at that time, very difficult. So this guy, the day he's supposed to do that match, he doesn't show up, and people are naturally, even Vince McMahon and everybody else, like they start to flip out and wonder what's happened to this dude. They call, he's not picked up. And 2 days pass by. Then Triple H, one of his closest friends at that time, he's calling him, and there's no answer. So finally, I think they send cops, or one of the wrestlers, I think Triple H or someone close to him who was a wrestler. They reach the house to check up on him. When they reach the house, naturally they can't. Nobody's answering, so they call the cops, and them with the cops enter into his house. They find his wife in a room, hung from the ceiling. They find his children. I think two children he had. Even they either hung or shot, one of the two. And even he shot himself. And that was the mystery of Chris Benoit, a people's champion, just one day suddenly waking up. Previous days he's chilled with all, like with Triple H, his best friend, and people like who are really a big deal at that time in WWE. He's already done a few matches. He chilled with them outside. They had a party and stuff. He's gone back home, and the very next day or the next day after, 2 days later, people enter his house and they see this that has happened. So first they found him shot. They found the wife hung and the kids also, I think, hung or shot, one of the two. And then they start digging what happened, what could have happened. So it turns out the dude one day just flipped a switch in his brain. First shot his wife, or first hung his wife, and then went on to the kids, killed them, and then killed himself. and that's the story of the champion Chris Benoit.
Is that the story you believe, though? What's your theory on that?
I believe that uh, actually, so the news events that followed later, whatever followed after, was a big cover up. After that, WWE sort of stopped mentioning him. They literally said that he's not part of our organization anymore and stuff like that. So we every interview that any WWE superstar did at that time for up until 10-15 years later, they did not they always uh, strayed away from the topic, or they did not mention him at all when it comes to this incident. So in a way, yeah, it could have been a cover up, as everything is in the US, or that's just a sad story of a guy who at at the top of his game went, I don't know, people have this mental flip, and yeah, it just, something clicks, and you kind of, you're never around anymore, and you've left a big question mark.
I think it sounds like there is a cover up. Yeah, I think they killed his wife and kids because they were witness to something. Like maybe someone tried to kill him, and then they realized, oh shit, his wife and kids are in the house. So then they kind of hung the wife, and just made everything look like he had done it.
Who knows, bro? There was a huge investigation into this. Like, after all, imagine somebody you're seeing on TV, someone who kids, bro. My generation, the kids were crazy about Chris Benoit, but we never even knew it until, of course, I grew up, and you know, stuff like that. Like I googled this. I went ahead and researched this. I came across this story, and I found it interesting enough to go through it.
Yeah, maybe he stumbled upon something that he wasn't supposed to. Maybe somebody killed him, maybe to take out the competition, maybe something to do with the WWF or E, whichever one he was associated with.
Could be.
That's I got to dig into that. That's quite interesting.
Very interesting, dude. Seriously, I mean, how many stories like that can you say about somebody who's actually a lot? Someone who's at the top of the game. Suddenly, an incident happens, they've vanished, or they're dead, they're deceased, and all that's left is a question mark. Why?